somewhere in Japan, and I think I just got robbed. I don't know where any of my stuff is. All I remember is there was this guy with this red hat with this blue and yellow striped shirt, and he was carrying a bat on his shoulders, and I think he took all my stuff. And
that didn't happen because I am in Texas right now. Anyways, let's go to the studio. So obviously none of that actually happened. So I recently took a trip to Vietnam, but it wasn't a direct flight. I had a layover in Haneda Airport in Japan, which is in the beautiful city of Tokyo. And I learned a few lessons from my layover that I want to share with you guys. So here in this video, I'm going to share with you all 3 lessons I learned from my trip to Japan. Lesson number 1 is to not be so rigid in your plan and schedule. Be flexible and open to what's happening around you. Over the last 3 years, I've spent a lot of time trying to create good habits and break bad ones. And I've shared a lot about that on this channel. And while I don't regret that at all and have experienced a lot of benefits from forming those habits, one of the side effects of doing so is that I tend to be a bit rigid in my schedule. In a previous video, I had talked about making the same smoothie for the last couple of years, last 2.5 years now, almost every single morning. And every morning that I'm off, I pretty much have the same routine. But it's made me a little bit rigid in my schedule enough that if I deviate from that schedule, I have a tendency it has a tendency to throw my mood off a little bit. And so when I was getting on the plane, I had discovered this interesting book called The Art of Travel by Alain de Botton, the way I read it throughout my trip to Vietnam. But the plan was to read that book and type out my thoughts and reflections on the book. But my plans changed whenever I sat down in my seat and I met my seatmate, who, believe it or not, crazy, wildest thing, also happened to be going to Vietnam. Crazy, I know. Found out that he was actually going to visit his fiance in Vietnam. I was going to visit my wife in Vietnam. I ended up asking him as the conversation went on. I was like, "Hey man, what do you do for a living?" And he said, "I'm a nurse." And I was like, "What?" Well, I didn't say that out loud, but in my head, that's what I said. I was like, "Whoa, that's absolutely crazy." Well, like, what are the chances sitting next to another nurse on the plane? Probably pretty high, there's a lot of nurses. But anyways, crazy that we had so much in common already. And we actually talked a decent amount on the ride to Vietnam, and I ended up making a new friend. If I wasn't open to new experiences and just kind of going with the flow, if I was so determined and rigid in following my plan to write and read, wouldn't have had that opportunity to make a friend, and I wouldn't have had the opportunity that was to follow on the layover. It's good to have habits and it's good to be disciplined and to have a routine, but there are times where you need to be present and you need to be open to the situation. It actually turns out we had the same ticket coming back from Vietnam, which was kind of odd, which made me suspect him a little bit. I'm gonna call him Tim because I'm not gonna use his real name. There's a small part of me that still suspects something. Lesson number 2, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. During our conversation, we both mentioned how we were thinking about going into Tokyo because we both had a 9-hour layover. We were both on the same flights, but we were a little bit hesitant because Tokyo is a massive city and filled with a lot of people who don't speak the language that we both speak, which we're both native English speakers. I think I remember when I looked up the statistic, about 13 to 30% of Japanese people speak some English, but only about 9 to 10% are confident enough to actually use their English skills to speak with native English speakers. My new friend, again, we're calling him Tim, he asked me if I wanted to go into Tokyo, if we wanted to split a cab and go into the city. And for a second, I was kind of hesitant. I was like, who's this guy? Even though we talked for a while, I was like, kind of weird to just go with a random guy to a foreign city. Don't know who he is, what he would do, or like what he's like. I don't know where this came from. I'm generally very cautious, not exactly a risk taker. I decided to take him up on his offer, and I said yes. I said, yeah man, let's share a cab. So right before we were getting ready to land in Tokyo, the flight attendant started passing out these disembarkation forms. I was like, did I make the right decision? So we go through the customs, we got our passports checked, they let us in, and we entered Tokyo. We then decided, how are we going to get into the city? We kind of talked about it, but we were like, a cab would be the easiest, just be the most direct. We could pay our money, go straight to our location, and then pay our money and come straight back. So that's what we decided on doing. Exchange our money to our Japanese yen. and we paid for these lockers that they had in the airport that you could store your bags in. Brought my camera, of course, always gotta have the camera. And we took a cab. We took a cab into Tokyo. My point is, if I wanted to, could I have probably gone into the city and been okay on my own? Most likely, yeah. I think I would be. But one, it probably would have been more expensive because I have nobody to split the cab with. And two, sometimes it's just good to have a second set of eyes, or just somebody that's, you know, on your team or on your side. Especially entering a foreign city, it's sometimes nice to just have somebody that you can somewhat trust, even though we didn't really know each other. A small part of me, Tim, is like, it's like, dude, I don't know, man. Like, this guy's stalking me. But anyways, you know, no, he's a friend now. He's a friend now. I can trust him for the most part. Yeah, just it's nice to have a second set of eyes to look at signs, a second person to bounce ideas off of, like, hey, let's go here, or maybe not, let's do this. While you can do a lot of things in life alone, it's always nice to have a partner or somebody there with you, a friend or friends. And it reminded me of this African proverb, and I think it's worth repeating. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I'm 100% an introvert, and I tend to like to do things alone. But, you know, I'm starting to realize, and one of the big lessons I've learned from this trip is that if you want to do great things and you want to go far in life, then you really need to have other people and be willing to help other people and be willing to be helped yourself. Another way to say this is teamwork makes the dream work. Very popular phrase, but I don't think it's an African proverb. Lesson number 3, it's important to get out of your comfort zone and see other perspectives. Having grown up in the US and having been only out of the country one time, and that time was over 20 years ago when I visited the Philippines, I've developed a very limited perspective of the outside world. Now, don't get me wrong, I grew up in a household with a lot of culture. I grew up in a Filipino household. I'm around a lot of my family in California. We had a lot of potlucks, a lot of parties. But to be completely honest with you, I'm not very in touch with my culture. I've spent my entire life here in the United States. And I always joke with people that the most Filipino part about me is that I'm a nurse, and that's kind of sad. And that's something I'm working on, because I really do think it's important to get in touch with your culture. It's important to get out of your bubble. You know, we were only inside the city, inside of Tokyo, for 3 hours. Enough time to cross Shibuya Crossing, which is where we decided to go, which, by the way, is the busiest pedestrian crosswalk in the world. For you, those of you who didn't know, just look at some of those crazy drone footage. I'll probably put some here. But we walked around the area a bit. We did the crossing. Of course, you got to do the crossing. We walked around. We went down this kind of cool looking alley with a lot of restaurants, and popped into a restaurant, which that restaurant we decided to go into. A little bit scary. Again, maybe I'm making some poor decisions and taking some crazy risks, but we decided to go to an underground restaurant. We kind of joked that we're gonna get robbed. Who knows? Maybe Ness would have popped around the corner with his baseball bat and beaten me. But we decided to get a quick bite. We were fine. You know, I had to try a little bit of tuna nigiri, a little bit of sushi, and then had some really good beef stew. Tim got some chicken skewers, which were pretty good. We went back out, kind of stayed in Shibuya for a little bit, saw a street performer, and then we decided to go back. So we went to the train. We're like, oh, maybe we can save some money on the train. Then we looked at the crazy amount of people in the train station. Looked at the boards with heavy Japanese, a little bit of English here and there, and we decided, you know, let's take a cab back. So we took a cab back to the airport, and we made it back okay. Point is, it's important to experience other cultures. You know, growing up in the US, it's easy to get that very limited focus, like I talked about, very limited viewpoint of the world. Tokyo is very much a city. Just seeing that was kind of a unique experience, just seeing just how many people there were. I could probably talk more about this with Vietnam, because I was there for two and a half weeks. I've been traveling a ton this summer. I have taken 13 total flights this summer in like 3 months, which I think that's like double the amount of flights I've taken in my lifetime. I am pretty worn out. Kind of glad to be home, although I do miss the traveling. I enjoyed it a lot. Big overarching lesson that I've learned from my travels, and I'm going to talk about it throughout my videos where I'm talking about my experience in Vietnam, is that you can learn a lot from things outside of the books. Books are great, don't get me wrong. Like, this is the reason I started my channel to begin with. Books are super important. A lot of life is learned from outside of the books. You got to experience life and see the world. It's important. I mentioned before, Tokyo wasn't my final destination. I still have a lot more lessons to share with y'all from my trip to Vietnam, so I'm going to talk about that in my future videos. But until then, thank you guys for watching. Thanks for putting up with my stupid jokes and me rambling. I'll see you guys in the next one.